Hi everyone, thank you for sticking around for the last hour of the meeting. We feel like we have a really great team. I'm going to let each person introduce themselves. My name is Sarah Hartman and I'm a faculty member in the Department of Teacher Education at Ohio University.
I'm Chris Kennedy and I'm also in the Teacher Department at Ohio University.
My name is Mike Kess. I'm in the Educational Studies Department at Ohio University.
And I'm Ann Kaufman from Marietta College and instructor in the Education Department. My name is Paige Coy and I'm a graduate student here at Ohio University in the Teacher Ed Department.
We have two people who aren't up here with us right now. The first is Chuck Lowry, who is unable to be here today, and the other is Marcy Kiefer Kennedy. Both of them have been really important in this process as well. Today we're going to be presenting the findings of our first year of data collection. We're currently involved in year 2, but this presentation is for the most part about year 1. We'll have a few slides at the end about what we're doing this year. But in year 1, we had one overarching question, and that was, how do student-teacher ratios impact student learning outcomes? And all of the work we did fell within that question. Our secondary questions were, how many increased student contact hours do measured teachers receive via the clinical model? How do teachers allocate additional student contact hours when they're working together? Is there a variation in the allocation of increased contact hours? And really important in this is, how do the increased contact hours impact student learning outcomes? And finally, how do teacher candidates' ideas impact mentor teachers' instructional decision making? We had 3 means of collecting data throughout the year. The first was a mixed method survey, which we're going to tell you about each of the 3 pieces separately. The second was a qualitative interview protocol, and the third was an observation protocol. Collectively, we have information that ranges from preschool to 12th grade, although different parts of these 3 instruments worked with different populations. So you may hear slight variations in terms of the grade levels that were targeted.
So the very first, method that we used was our mixed method survey. The mixed method survey was administered to K-12 teachers throughout our clinical model range at the Patton College, as well as Harmer Elementary, which is one of Marietta College's clinical model schools. We distributed this through Qualtrics, emailed it out through Qualtrics. We had 345 participants. We were pretty pleased with the number of people that actually did it. We had 126, which we felt was a really good response rate. We had approximately 50 questions. Most of the questions really weren't questions, they were statements, and they were like a Likert scale, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree type of thing. And there were 2 open-ended, basically qualitative questions at the end. Survey results, 95% of respondents said that they enjoyed having teacher candidates in their classroom. 96 said that teacher candidates positively contributed to their classroom, which we were very pleased to see. 94 said that their students benefited from their presence. And with our clinical model being that we really want positive impact on PK to 12 students, we felt really happy with this particular piece here, that teachers really thought that they were really helping their students. 96% believed that having teacher candidates allowed for more one-on-one instruction. 73% reported that candidates make them a better teacher, which we were also very pleased with, that having those teacher candidates in their classroom made them reflect more, made them actually think about their teaching practices and do a better job with that. 72% said that teacher candidates encouraged them to try new instructional practices. So we're talking about simultaneous renewal. Our teacher candidates are getting a lot of really great instruction from and get really great ideas from our mentor teachers, but our mentor teachers are also getting really great ideas from our teacher candidates. They come into the classroom, try new ideas, and this kind of bared that out, at least our thoughts on that. 91.3 do not believe that candidates will negatively impact their OTES evaluations, or their Ohio Teacher Evaluation System evaluations. This is actually a sticking point for some teachers about why they don't want to take teacher candidates in their classroom. They always say that that will potentially hurt my OTES results. The teachers that actually take the candidates don't believe that.
Maybe this needs to be understood from the context of your engagement with the clinical model. It could be that in some arenas where you're not engaged in the clinical model the way it's employed in this region, that may be a factor. I don't know. I just think that this response is contextual, right? Because
Potentially, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
going back to the one where we said where we thought they actually helped the students and they actually were more reflective on their practices, kind of helps reiterate this, I think.
Right.
So. 96.6% of the teachers feel that having a teacher candidate makes them responsible for modeling effective teaching practices, meaning that they are really thinking about what they're teaching, they're being a little bit more detailed on how they're doing it, and making sure that they're really taking to heart being a good role model for these future teachers. And then 68.9%, actually this one might be viewed as a negative. 69.8% of the participants report having a teacher candidate results in a loss of instructional planning time. So that might be one downfall to the clinical model, but we feel that the benefits outweigh that particular loss.
And we will report more about why we believe they feel that way later on.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
We had two open-ended questions as part of the survey. And these were both coded, if you go back to our original research question, around time allocation and impact on student outcomes. More narrowly coded, that was our first cycle of coding. Second cycle coding, we did a more narrow focused code. And innovative, these are the codes that we found. Innovative and thematic sort of analysis. And that innovative and new ideas, individualized one-on-one and small group instruction. There's a lot of discussion about the change in teaching habits and low impact on student income outcomes. Planning time change, traditional model, non-instructional tasks, hands-on interactive teaching, and role models. Let me give you a couple of examples. Overwhelmingly, mentor teachers report that having teacher candidates present allows more individualized one-on-one and small group instruction to be given to students. So we know that that's important. The STAR study and others have beared witness to the importance of smaller classrooms and more individualized instruction. So this survey supported that, and the clinical model supports that. Teacher candidates also are especially helpful in contributing fresh and innovative ideas. This is especially true related to technology. So this continuous sort of update, it's almost like a development piece, we think, that we could follow up on, like teacher ongoing development through what our mentor teachers are bringing into, our candidates are bringing into the classroom. And technology for us all, this is a changing dynamic force that our candidates are more in tune with than some of the more seasoned teachers. Mentor teachers feel that they use more hands-on interactive teaching methods when teacher candidates are present. We're going to talk about observations that we've done to sort of to investigate this more closely, but we thought these were really interesting sort of initial findings from our survey. Some of the larger quotes, one of the related to student outcomes, teacher candidates can spend extra time with struggling students, so we know resources are an issue for a lot of our schools, and one-on-one instruction is important, and this participant also stated that they can present information a different way or with a different perspective. They can retest, etc., allow the struggling readers. Teacher candidates can also bring into the classroom different ideas on how to present new material, including activities, videos, and websites. It goes back to this sort of synergy between what students are learning in their classes, what they're experiencing, and able to bring that into the classroom for their mentor teachers. Colleague from Marietta College.
So with regard to the qualitative interviews, we conducted those with 15 K-3 mentor teachers. There were 25 open-ended questions during those interviews. Those 15 teachers represented 3 different school districts, and there were 6 school buildings that were actually part of those qualitative interviews. And then utilizing the themes and codes from the qualitative survey findings, our data analysis is ongoing, although we're wrapping up that part as we begin to transition in and have transitioned into year 2. So from those interviews, we just wanted to pull a couple specific quotes from the participants. So the first one, a teacher said, "It's hard to modify assignments if that needs done, because you have so many kids you're trying to do something for at the same time. So with an extra set of hands and an extra body, you can do just about anything." So we thought that just really showed like how beneficial these teachers are viewing the teacher candidates. Then another one, it makes you look at yourself, and as a teacher, you can't stay the same. You always have to strive to improve and set goals for yourself. Education is such a fluid environment that if you don't go with the flow and make changes to what is coming, then you're not going to be successful. So I think that goes back to what Mike was saying about that ongoing dynamic changes that are always happening. The last part of our data collection for the year involved an observation protocol. And this really does speak again to that 68% of mentor teachers who said that they experienced loss of planning time when teacher candidates are there. This part of our research will speak to that because what we've found overwhelmingly is that mentor teachers, instead of planning individually when they have teacher candidates there, are overwhelmingly working with those teacher candidates. So it makes very logical sense that they would have decreased planning time, for example. But to tell you a little bit about the observation protocol really allowed the research team to quantify how teacher candidates and mentor teachers are spending their time together when they are in the classroom together. As far as we have been able to ascertain, there has not been any research reported like this, truly going into classrooms and trying to quantify exactly how both partners are spending their time. We conducted 44 observations. Each observation lasted for 21 minutes. We collected data points every 3 minutes during that 21-minute period. We did those observations in 16 mentor teachers' classrooms within 3 public school districts and 5 elementary schools. And this did include both our Ohio University network and also the Marietta College network. So consequently, we ended up with 924 total minutes of observations that we were able to collect these data points from, which ended up being 700 data points that we had. We were pretty excited about that. Pretty significantly, and anyone who has spent time within our clinical model classrooms, you will notice that a lot of times there are partners, both university-based partners and school-based partners, that are continually in and out of classrooms. I personally am a faculty coordinator at one of our local schools. Children don't blink an eye when I walk into the classroom. You don't have to stop instruction and have children ask you, "Oh, who's that?" or "Why are you here?" They really just accept us as part of the classroom. So that really helped to facilitate these observations.
Could you elaborate a little more about 700 data points? What do you mean by this?
So within each of those 21-minute observations, we had 7 data points. Because we were taking observation notes every 3 minutes throughout that. So consequently, we had made arrangements prior with mentor teachers to say, would it be okay with you, will you consent, obviously, and with school district support, to allow us to be in your room to do these observations. Mentor teachers very graciously allowed us to do so, but we did not call them and say, we'd like to come on Thursday at 10 o'clock, simply because we wanted to have a really authentic picture of what was happening. And if something had been prearranged, it would be harder to know that. Not necessarily impossible, but it would be harder to know that. The other thing that we tried to do for reliability is that a approximately 1/3 of every single observation was conducted with 2 of us present. And then we met to debrief after each of those observations to make sure that we reached a consensus about those points. We based the observation protocol on the work of Friend and Cook and their co-teaching model that has been pretty well studied. The model actually describes 6 approaches to co-teaching, and we use those 6 approaches to co-teaching to develop the observation protocol. I should probably also mention that we did also seek outside support and consultation from the mentor teachers that we work with to actually look at that observation protocol. Some of those partners may even remember seeing it. So there are 6 of them. They include, and Chris is going to tell you in just a minute what those are, but they include those 6 things up here, but then also on the observation protocol, we had space to mark monitoring independent work, transition periods, and things that we would consider non-instructional tasks. Cleaning up, prepping, working on the bulletin board, something of that sort.
I feel like I should give the mic to Pam and Mary Ann when I talk about these co-teaching models, but I'll give it a whirl. Okay, here we go, because they're the gurus of this. So here are the 6 types of co-teaching according to Friend and Cook. One is one teach, one observe, and in this model, let's say the teacher that's signified by the red oval would be teaching while the other one would be sitting there taking notes. They might be taking observational notes about the general classroom or maybe one individual child in hopes that they can later reflect and make the lesson better. So that's one. The next one, which we saw quite a bit, by the way, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but here we go. Station teaching. Station teaching where one teacher is at one desk working with a small group, another teacher's at another desk working with a small group, and there might be other stations with other children doing independent work. That would be station teaching. Alternative teaching where one teacher would be teaching the whole group, while this particular teacher over here would be working with a small group, potentially on something totally different that's differentiated for those individual students. Teaming, which is down here in this corner, which would be both teachers teaching at the same time, maybe going off of each other back and forth. This one is parallel teaching, where one teacher has one group of children, maybe split the group in half, and they're both teaching the same lesson, but to smaller groups of folks, maybe splitting them in half. And then one teach, one assist, where the one teacher is teaching while the other teacher is monitoring monitoring each child, walking around, maybe attending to a child who might not be on task, or just maybe helping a student that's not really getting the lesson. So, okay.
You can imagine that at the beginning, when we started doing these observations, it took quite a while of us working together to make sure that we were seeing, the same things. And so at the beginning, we actually did 2 or 3 observations where the entire team, anyone who was going to be collecting data, actually we went together.
We invaded Liz's class with like 4 of us. And yeah, so it took us a little while to get on the same page.
So in terms of our findings, we're pretty excited about what we found. We found that teacher candidates and mentor teachers, when they were working together, nearly 90% of the time they were together, they were actually engaged in one of those 6 forms of co-teaching.
Can I say that in visiting the schools, I did not know that's what you called it, but I can see, I saw all of those models being used, but I didn't know it was something special. Not being a teacher, I did see that, but I wouldn't have known what you called it, or that was, as you say, intentional. I mean, I knew they intended to have different groups and stuff. You understand what I'm saying? Sure.
I have no doubt that our mentor teachers who are in the classroom absolutely recognize each of those 6 things.
Yes. That's nice to now I don't know that I'll remember that's what it's called, but I will know there's a name for it.
Station teaching, which you might also think of in the education world as center-based teaching. Station teaching represented 21% and was the most common type of co-teaching that we saw. This observation protocol, as it was with K to 3 classrooms, that makes a lot of sense that we did see a significant amount of station teaching. Also significant is that only 6.3% of mentor teachers and 5.3% of teacher candidates' time was spent on non-instructional tasks while we were there. This provides, if you look at the overall time when we were there and a combination of both the mentor teachers and the teacher candidates, you'll see that 88.9% of the time was spent co-teaching, and only 11.1% was in one of the other 3 areas that we were collecting data.
Don't you think this first year data is worthy of publication?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying, I have not seen this elsewhere.
No.
We
We haven't seen it elsewhere either. There is information absolutely about co-teaching, but there's not information about co-teaching within a well-developed clinical model
Yes.
framework.
and you're
And
presenting
not
this at
quantified. Yes, we have a slide about, we have several places we're presenting. This, in particular, where we are presenting this observation protocol data. If you want to look more closely at the breakdown, this is for teacher candidate time allocation. So again, you'll see for teacher candidates, if you break them down separately, it's 24.7. They were leading teaching 21% of the time. You'll see the small squares. I think the way this is formatting it because of Zoom and everything, the 4.7 and the 5.4 areas are cut off down here, unfortunately. But those represent transitions and non-instructional tasks. And then this is for mentor teachers. Again, you will also notice the small slices for those 3 areas that were not part of the co-teaching model. And combined,
And that yellow is, what is that yellow now?
yellow is observing.
Okay.
So one or the other may have been observing while somebody else, but observing could have been taking place while they were leading teaching. They could have been observing during a small group intervention, for example. There are many times that observations could have been happening, both on the mentor teacher and the teacher candidate
And
side.
a lot of times when that happened, the mentor teacher was standing there watching the whole group, being led by the teacher candidate, and then a child would need help, and then it would turn into one teach, one assist, but it wouldn't be an active one teach, one assist. It depended on that 3-minute time frame. So then the next time it might have returned.
And that is one thing that we will talk about that we are talking about in the discussion of publication, is that it was a fluid process often. Very rarely were they doing the exact same thing for the entire 21-minute observation. So the implications for PTO student learning, we're pulling that together. This is looking at the implications from the whole first year of data, so all 3 of those data collection methods.
So that's a survey, qualitative, interviews, and our observation. So we, overall, find suggests that the clinical model has a positive impact on student learning environments in K-12 settings. Specifically, mentor teachers acknowledge that teacher candidates' prolonged engagement is a direct correlation. They have talked and said and stated that having teacher candidates in the clinical model from their opinion, has a observation of a direct impact on student learning. Mentor teachers who engage in the clinical model teacher preparation are more actively engaged in classroom practices. When children in a room, they're less likely to participate in traditional employee behaviors such as reading papers and writing lessons. And if you go back to in the study of the survey, they feel an obligation to role model good teaching to the folks that they're teaching, the teacher candidates, right? So this is part of their process. Mentor teachers gain valuable new ideas, especially for utilizing technology, that may positively impact student learning outcomes. And we think this is an important finding, and we need to get our colleagues involved in the technology area to help better understand what this means. But that's has come up across the data collection.
Okay, more implications for P12 student learning. Student-teacher ratios are significantly lowered by utilizing the clinical model of teacher preparation, as low student-teacher ratios are associated with higher student gains. Embracing the clinical model for teacher preparation provides a way for improve student outcomes. It's basically teachers can differentiate. We always talk to our teacher candidates before they go to the clinical model and their clinical model placements to be actively involved, but majorly communicate, because your teachers are really anticipating that you're going to be there and they plan around you. So some of that planning that we talked about earlier, that additional planning that they're doing additional planning that's taking away time from their instructional planning because they're planning for them to be there. So they really look forward to that. I can probably speak to that for you guys because I know you guys feel that way. Classrooms that employ clinical model are utilizing high levels of co-teaching. Obviously, we just saw that. Therefore, children receive increased instructional contact hours and are provided more individual instruction. Specific learning challenges and/or behavior difficulties may be addressed while co-teaching is being implemented. They have more time to address those individual concerns while they're in the classroom. And then these all imply that the clinical model is highly correlated to improved student learning outcomes.
Two manuscripts, we have a lot of data, so we're working on two right now. I will say that this team just submitted an article for review that came from a study that we were doing prior to the CODEC grant, but we stayed together. So there's another PDS-driven manuscript that just went out. The first one is examination of time allocation early childhood teacher candidates and clinically based field experiences. The target journal there is the Journal of Teacher Education, which is a well-respected journal. The second title that we're working through is More Than Extra Hands, a mixed method study of the clinical model of teacher preparation, which will look at all of the data and sort of bring the qualitative and the quantitative together. Target journal is the Journal of Teacher Education and Practice.
And we're very excited about disseminating our findings. You guys were asking about presentations. We have 4 of them accepted on this just in the next month. So we're got a busy March into April, going to different conferences. The first one is our AACTE, which we'll be presenting next week, Friday, a week from today, as a matter of fact. The clinical model and time allocation. So we'll be talking about that observational piece. We have an AERA in New York City that's going to be done an examination of, once again, time allocation for the early childhood candidates' clinical-based field experiences. Octio, yes. And this one is a little bit more about the whole year study, collaborative multi-college examination of the college's impact. And then one of NAPDS, which we're excited about as well. More Than Extra Hands. How are the teacher candidates utilized in K3 PDS? More about the observational piece that we really feel is a really great piece.
And that's just year 1. So as we look to year 2, our primary questions, we have 3. How does the clinical model impact students' school affiliation? What are school stakeholders' perceptions of the clinical model's impact on school culture? And how does school affiliation and school culture impact student learning outcomes? So our primary questions. Our secondary questions are, how do students perceive that teacher candidates impact their learning? What are school stakeholders' perceptions of the clinical model's impact on student school affiliation? And how do school stakeholders perceive the clinical model impacts school learning culture? So that's for year 2. And then our research sites where we are conducting this year 2 data, Athens City School District, Nelsonville York City Schools, Marietta City School District, and also Federal Hocking Local School District. So the year 2 data collection, I'm really excited about this because I feel like I'm finally getting a chance to get in there and do that. Right now, we're doing focus group interviews with parents and caregivers. That's ongoing right now. 3 school districts, 6 schools, 1 to 2 focus group interviews at each school, and those are lasting about 45 minutes to an hour. We're also going to do interviews with 3rd and 4th grade students, approximately 25 interviews with children who work with teacher candidates in their classrooms.
And that is IRB approved.
We actually have consent already for a number of children, to be able to interview them.
There's so little data on parents and caregivers that could probably just be a paper by itself.
I want to say, was Harmer up on the school districts that we were?
Yes.
There it is.
There it is.
There it is, yeah. And then finally, the third piece of data collection would be student attendance records.
We are really excited about talking to children. There also is not any data that has been reported that we have located that actually reports what children have to say. We're specifically looking at 3rd and 4th grade. 3rd because they will have had the opportunity to have worked with teacher candidates for a number of years, and 4th because it's the first year in many of the schools that they do not have a teacher candidate there on a predictable day or time.
You know, Kate standards ask for student surveys, and it was something when the standards were first vetted, we're like, what? You know, we're gonna be collecting data, or we're gonna be requested to submit student data as an impact on our programs, and we kind of pushed back on that, but something, I mean, just because we didn't know how it would work. So this really shows one way, right? And even if the data are very preliminary, and even if they're, you know, from a research methodology standpoint, levels of limitations that would be in a publication. I mean, it is something. So, I mean, as you disseminate this out, I expect people might pick up on that part too, because I think schools and it's, you know, educator preparation programs, EPPs, are trying to figure out how they're going to go about meeting that part, because that is a very new type of data that we've never really been required to submit before. So.
And we worked really hard to develop the instrument that we're using to interview the children. Piloted it and making sure that it will actually.
On the instrument itself, like
Say that again, I'm sorry.
you could probably have a publication of just the instrument itself, and since you piloted it, I'm sure looked at reliability and validity and all of that. Or we'll be gathering that data once you're.
Yeah, we are definitely planning that there would be a publication both about the caregiver, focus groups, and the information that comes from the children.
We've already received some pretty interesting stuff on the caregiver. We haven't really thoroughly went through it yet, but initial stuff, it's been really, really interesting. So, pretty positive for the most part. There's been a little bit of like, wait a second, but most of it's been pretty positive.
It's been really interesting to just listen to.
And about why they like them there.
That, exactly. So we're excited about year 2.
You may not be able to speak to this yet, but I'm curious if you've had any of those interesting confounding moments where what you've seen versus what they're telling you differ quite a bit, and maybe it's a perception thing, maybe it's just a misunderstanding thing as far as, are you just able to speak about any of that?
In what part?
Okay, so pardon me. So sometimes, like, a teacher will say, I teach in a certain way, but you observe it differently, or I interact with the students this way, but it's not quite what they're saying, or with the co-teacher. I don't know if you're able to address any of that, and if you're not at this time, that's fine as well.
I don't know that we were necessarily looking for that.
Okay.
Well, in the observation protocol, we were really looking at what is happening in the classroom, what are they doing? So,
I think methodology, we weren't really trying to compare what, teachers' philosophy versus their practice. That wasn't.
You were really just observing what you saw.
Right. Inside the clinical model that's been implemented in schools. And so it's an interesting, I don't know if that would fit our research
It might
questions
not.
in the same way. I think for me, that would, how that would, I would feel, I would be hesitant to sort of go into that line of research because, teachers work really hard Oh, and it's, we were really great, they're gracious to us to have us in their classrooms, so we really appreciate
As a
all
It
the
sounds
support.
like you were looking at what authentically happened.
Right, we were, we didn't interview teachers.
And that's
We
why
didn't
you
interview
didn't
the
say we're
teachers,
coming
right?
at such and such a time, you just came.
Not the survey, but like
Right.
as the.
As
your
a
practice.
coordinator who is bebopping in and out of these classrooms quite a bit, actually, to be honest with you, the observation percentages were, to me, I was shocked. I didn't think it would be as much co-teaching as I actually end up seeing when we started going through the data, because I think kind of what Dr. Middleton was saying, when you went in and you didn't really realize it was happening, but then when you're in there talking to teachers and watching, that's just, sometimes it's business as usual until you really start analyzing it, and then you realize, wow, there really was co-teaching going on. There was a lot more than I thought when I initially walked in.
I think it's a different perspective as well, because typically when we are going into the classroom in our, university capacity, we're there to talk with the mentor teachers, to offer support to the mentor teachers, and we're also there to offer support to the teacher candidates and to offer feedback oftentimes to our teacher candidates. Very rarely are we actually paying attention to specifically what the mentor teacher is doing. That's just not usually our focus when we go into a classroom.
Although some of the things are really interesting, so it's hard to keep up with the observation. That was fun to listen to, what are we doing?
We're sitting there with our timer out, and every 3 minutes trying to make sure we're getting all of the information down.
Thank you. This is a very good research. I have 2 questions for you. My first question is why you choose students' attendance as your outcome variable, and your rationale for this. And another reason is, are you getting any information from your students? Eventually, this all instructional model is helping students learn better, right? And a more effective learning procedures. So, are you conducting a focus group interview for children as well, or?
Well, we're interviewing the children one-on-one, and the main reason that we're focused on the children and not on the teacher candidates is there actually is a lot of information about the impact of the clinical model on teacher candidates, but not as much information on the impact of the children who they work with. Go ahead.
I mean, going back to the student attendance, we hear from a lot of teachers that their students get really excited when their candidates in the classroom, and we kind of feel that because they get excited, if there is a day where that maybe they don't feel quite as well, but they know Miss So and So is going to be in class today, that they are more willing to go to school on that day and make sure that they're there. Does that make sense?
We're very uncertain about whether or not attendance records will show anything.
Yeah, they might not show anything, but we would like
We
to
don't
see.
know, but we want to look.
We haven't dropped it yet, right? It's there, let's see what happens. If there's nothing, there's nothing, but there might be something. So it's still on our slide.
So my
And how
question
you,
is,
how you do that, and how you measure that, and how you take into account
okay.
all the variables that go with that, that's really complicated. And that's part of what we're struggling with. We meet weekly, our team meets every week for an hour, and we spend a lot of time trying to figure out these sort of questions. And we started into this question.
Especially
It's a
because
good question.
most of the classrooms that we would be investigating this in would be kindergarten to 3rd grade. But we don't think that kindergarten and for sure kindergarten and 1st grade students are necessarily aware of that enough that it would impact anything.
I will make a point.
So we don't know. We'll see.
We're starting to plan 3rd year piece.
Yeah.
So think about get the data for the 1st year disseminated, collect data 2nd year, 3rd year planning, and we're looking at older populations of students. So this may be a better discussion with high school age folks. We have programs in high school.
We've talked a lot about this, and it's perhaps harder for the older students to sometimes predict when teacher candidates are going to be there because their schedules are more varied in the middle childhood and AYA programming as opposed to the early childhood programming, where children by 2nd and 3rd grade definitely do know that the teacher candidates are there on a Tuesday and a Thursday.
Eva,
But we do know from, we do know from some of the parent interviews or the caretakers interviews that a lot of them are saying they love their teachers that come in that are partnership candidates or other teacher candidates, and they talk about them constantly. So we do know that they're very aware of them being there. It's just whether they're aware when they're there, going to be there is the question.
So we had a question from Zoom. It's from Paula McMurray Schwartz. Were the mentors and the teacher candidates trained to use the co-teaching strategies?
As far as we know, they have not had specific training. That's a great question. Actually, it's something that I plan to, as part of my seminar, work with them, talk about these different models. But no, we don't believe that there's been specific training in it, just that it has become the culture of what the clinical model actually represents and what it looks like throughout both of these networks, that the expectation has changed via the clinical model, and that it's not a one person teach and the other person go do something else.
They have some teachers present.
We may have had like an hour PD on it or something on a professional development day, a breakout session that you could choose to go to. That would be like an hour, just kind of an overview of how you should be utilizing your teacher candidates in the
But I think it
classroom.
would be really interesting to do follow-up research, kind of looking at that pie chart that you described about the different types of co-teaching and where mostly people fell, and see how much that would be influenced or changed percentage-wise based on the teachers having received some training in the co-teaching module.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Co-teaching, professional development,
Yeah.
online workshops.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Well, and I know that
So
some,
it's augmenting.
yes.
In their junior block for their instructional adaptations course, there's 1 week where we talk about the different co-teaching models, and many of them make direct connections because what we talk about they're experiencing in the schools, so it's very real to them. And I think they enjoy learning that what they're doing in the schools has strong evidence behind it to.
And I know in my building, it's a administration expectation that we're using the co-teaching model when there are candidates and interns in the classroom.
This summer, Marietta College is offering professional development training for some of our partnership schools. We're getting Average Ability in to do some training with us. So we're starting to offer professional development for our partnership school teachers in the summer. So hopefully they'll take advantage of that.
And Paula said that she and Kim Sorley have been trained through St. Cloud. They've completed the Train the Trainer workshop and have trained mentor candidate pairs in our area.
That's awesome. I would love to hear more about that.